This is the famous Panther tank, probably the best German tank of World War II. The Germans call it a medium tank. We'd probably in Britain or America, we would have called it a heavy tank, coming in at about 44 tons. The Germans tended to categorize their tanks less about the weight, but about their use. This tank's a product of the Germans going into Russia in July of 1941. They meet for the first time the famous T-34 tank and KV-1 tanks of the Russian army. They have obviously more superior firepower, more superior armour protection than the tanks that the Germans, the Panzer III and IV, are using at the time. And Hitler says we're going to need a new main battle tank. And in September of 42, the first prototype's running, and they get them into production. The actual first model is not the Ausführung A, the Model A as we normally would consider them. They work down the letters in the German system. The first model that goes into production is actually the Model D, and they have lots of problems with it because of this rush production, and also from the point of view of just simple technical errors that are going on. They have issues with the tyres, the rubber coming off, issues with the transmission, and some engine fires. And those first Panthers in action at Kursk, a lot of them end up being taken out of action because of mechanical failure, not because of Russian gunfire. And of course, the problem then, of course, from the summer of 43 onwards, is the German army's on the retreat. So if your tank breaks down, unless you own the battlefield, recovering it becomes a major problem. In terms of the tank, once they've ironed out these problems, it's a fantastically effective machine. It's got this massive 75mm KWK-42 gun on it. That can fire an armour-piercing round out the end at about 1,100 meters a second. And it's a very accurate gun on a flat trajectory. Good optics, that was something the Allies noticed all the time about German tanks, having very effective optics on them. That round will come out with a huge amount of force behind it, and it's got a very flat trajectory, which means aiming it is much easier. You don't have to lob the shell onto a tank at distance. As long as the gun's pointed at it, it should hit it. That was the idea, because it's got so much force taking that round towards the target. The armour protection is about 8 centimetres on the front, much thinner on the sides. And part of the tactics of using the Panther was making sure you didn't expose your sides to the enemy, because the thinner plate armour, you've got ammunition stowage underneath, could become a problem. Engine at the rear, the Maybach HL210 in the early models and the HL230P in the later models, gives it about 600 horsepower. That's transmitted from the rear through to these front drive sprockets. And the wide tracks with these 8 double wheels on each side give the vehicle a very, very smooth ride over open country. And the mobility of the Panther and its speed, you know, getting up to about 38 miles an hour, that's noted on, is one of its key features. So firepower, good mobility, good armour protection. The only issues, again, is the Germans are still probably over-engineering their tanks. About 6,000 are made, but that's just not enough as the war progresses. They're just not getting enough out. Small indication about how Germany was faring at the end of the war. This camouflage scheme, we all get very excited about late war German camouflage scheme. This one is sometimes known as the third scheme. It was designed specifically just so they only used about a third of the paint that they would usually use on a normal tank. So what you're looking at is the undercoat, the red oxide, with only a third of normal paint used. And it's quite effective. This very tank you're looking at was made after the war. It's a Model G tank. It was made in the factory after the Allies had won. The Germans had surrendered. They got some factory workers back and made a number of Panther Gs and Jag Panthers for testing. And of course, tanks were captured during the war and tested by the Americans and British because it was a tank we really knew we had to defeat and also learn lessons from.